Ever wish you could just cut through all the noise and get right to the heart of a topic, without getting bogged down in all the details? Well, that's what we're all about here. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into, it's called fichaestandard.pdf. But it basically lays out how to run coaching sessions like a pro. Ejecución de sesión de coaching, to be precise.
Sounds pretty dry, right? But hold on, this isn't just some random guide. This is like the official standard from CONOCER. That's the big national certification body for skills and stuff in Mexico. So it's kind of a big deal. It sets the benchmark for what real, professional coaching should actually look like.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, it's used to evaluate and certify coaches. It covers everything from how they prep for a session to how they make sure you're getting the most out of it. And, it's also used for training programs to actually help coaches develop all these skills they need.
Now, you sent this our way because you're really interested in the nitty-gritty of what professional coaching is all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether you're thinking about becoming a coach yourself, working with one, or just curious about, what makes a coaching experience truly effective, this document is like the blueprint.
Totally. So today, we'll break down the key stages according to this standard. How a coach gets ready beforehand, how they actually guide the session itself, and then how they evaluate how effective it was. Get ready for some surprising stuff and some really practical insights you can use, even if you're not, directly involved in coaching. So let's kick things off with what happens before you even step into the room. The preparation phase.
Preparation. This is where the magic starts. It's like building a foundation, right? The coach is laying the groundwork for a conversation that's really tailored to you and what you need. The standard makes it clear that this involves thinking carefully about your goals, what topics might come up, and the specific tools and techniques that might be helpful.
So it's not just winging it, right? There's actual documentation involved.
Yeah.
The standard talks about process documentation. Sounds pretty official.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
Exactly. Think of it like your medical records. Before a doctor sees you, they take a look at your history, right? Same idea here. The standard says this documentation should include your basic info, obviously, but also your overall goals for the whole coaching process and the specific goals for that particular session. It also tracks actions you've planned before, any big aha moments you had, and any tasks you've been working on.
So it's all about context and seeing the bigger picture of your progress. It makes sense that a coach wouldn't just start from scratch every time. Now, for sessions after that very first one, it sounds like the preparation gets a bit more focused.
Yeah, you got it. From the second session onwards, there's this thing called a session strategy. Basically, the coach notes down what you talked about last time, outlines possible topics for the upcoming session, and thinks about which coaching tools they might use. It's all about being organized and deliberate. No shooting from the hip here.
Very cool. So beyond just looking at notes, what kind of knowledge does a coach need to have to really prepare effectively according to this standard?
Well, first off, they got to understand the coaching contract. Basically, the ground rules for the whole relationship, the agreement you made at the beginning. They also need to know what makes a good goal in a coaching context, making sure it's actually relevant to you and what you want.
Right, because you can't really work towards something if you don't know what success looks like.
Yeah.
What else is important for the coach to know beforehand?
Well, they need to be able to recognize those aha moments when you're actually learning and growing. They also need to understand why tasks are important in coaching, how those actions can help you move forward. And of course, they should be familiar with different coaching tools and techniques, knowing when to use which.
So it's like they've got this whole toolkit of approaches, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just about knowing this stuff, but also their attitude, right? The standard mentions that too.
Oh, definitely. The standard specifically says the coach needs to be organized with their documentation and really responsible when choosing what information to focus on. They got to zero in on stuff that relates to your goals and the challenges you're facing.
Right. So we've talked about all the behind the scenes stuff. Now let's move into the actual session itself.
Yeah.
How the coach facilitates things. This is where the real conversation happens, right?
Absolutely. It's all about that interaction between you and the coach. They're guiding you through the process to help you reach those goals. And one of the first things the standard talks about is ethical conduct. It's super important.
Yeah, ethics are crucial in any kind of relationship like this, where you're vulnerable and sharing personal stuff. So what are some of the specific guidelines in the standard?
Okay, so first, they got to give you a code of ethics. It's like the rule book, what you can expect from them. Second, they should go over at least 5 key points from that code with you right at the start, just to make sure you're on the same page. And then they got to be open to answering any questions you have about ethics. Like throughout the whole process, it's about transparency and trust. And then, of course, they need to show you their credentials, prove they know what they're doing.
Right, that totally makes sense. That kind of openness from the beginning is key. Now, beyond the ethical stuff, there's this idea of the coach maintaining full presence. What does that even mean in a coaching session?
Full presence is all about being totally in the moment with you, like no distractions, giving you their undivided attention, really listening to what you're saying and picking up on your body language too. It's about being present, It also means using humor when it's appropriate to keep things light, being flexible and willing to try new things, and creating a space where you feel comfortable expressing your emotions.
Wow, that sounds intense, like a lot of energy focused right on you. And that must play a big part in building trust, which the standard also mentions. What are some ways a coach can build that trust?
Well, it starts with building rapport, right? Finding common ground, making you feel comfortable. They should also say outright that they care about your well-being and your growth and be genuine about it. Their words and actions need to match up, walk the walk. Setting clear agreements about how you'll work together is also huge, and actually sticking to those agreements. And of course, asking for your permission before diving into new territory, respecting your ideas, offering confidentiality and support, and actively encouraging your learning.
So it's all about creating this partnership, this sense of mutual respect. Now, effective communication is at the heart of any good coaching session, and the standard goes deep on active listening. What exactly does that involve?
Active listening, in this context, means going beyond just hearing the words. It's about maintaining eye contact, reflecting back what you've said, both the actual content and the emotions behind it, without any judgment. It means putting your agenda first and not pushing their own opinions. It's about paraphrasing to make sure they understand, summarizing key takeaways, and weaving your ideas into the conversation. And, really importantly, it's about helping you clarify your thoughts, express yourself fully, and examine the assumptions behind your thinking. They're like a mirror, reflecting your own thoughts and feelings back to you.
I love that analogy. And then, of course, there are questions. What makes a good coaching question different from, just chatting with a friend?
The standard actually distinguishes between 2 types of questions: clarifying questions and reflective questions. Clarifying questions are all about getting on the same page, making sure you agree on the goals, figuring out the gap between where you are and where you want to be, reviewing your actions, checking your progress.
So that's about getting the facts straight, laying out the plan. What about those aha moments we talked about? What kinds of questions lead to those?
Those come from reflective questions. They build on what the coach has heard you say and help you explore your beliefs, values, that inner voice in your head, and those deeply ingrained patterns of thinking. These questions nudge you to see things from different angles and stay focused on the session's goal. They often lead to those big realizations and shifts in perspective.
So it's about gently guiding you towards those aha moments without forcing it. Right? Now, once you have those insights, the next step is turning them into action. How does the standard describe that part of the process?
Well, it's all about creating action alternatives. The standard suggests setting up experimental tasks with deadlines to encourage you to step outside your comfort zone. The coach should also ask about how you learn best and how fast you like to move to make sure the plan fits you. Then there's figuring out how to use your resources and creating action plans with, those SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. The coach's role is to facilitate your learning through these actions, help you explore different possibilities, brainstorm solutions to obstacles, and figure out if your plan is actually doable.
So it's not just about coming up with random ideas, but making sure they're actually realistic and, will get you results. Now, the standard also talks about how coaches should phrase their questions in general. What makes a coaching question good?
Good coaching questions should be open-ended, not just a yes or no answer. They use language that's easy to understand, stay focused on the topic, are specific and concrete, and might even use what-if scenarios to help you think things through.
So guiding your thinking without, telling you what to think. Now, throughout all this, it's really your journey, right? How does the standard talk about that?
It emphasizes that you're the one in charge. You're the one responsible for taking action, setting the pace, and achieving your goals. It's your show. If you don't complete an action, the coach should talk about it openly and figure out why. They help you make your own decisions, suggest specific actions to get you closer to your goals, and regularly review what you've agreed to. And they should celebrate your wins, no matter how small.
It's all about balancing support with accountability, right? And feedback is so important for growth. How does the standard approach that?
Feedback is key. It should be a regular part of the process. When the coach gives you feedback, they should always ask permission first. The feedback itself should be about what you did, not their opinions or judgments. It should be respectful, and they should check if you understood it. And when they're asking for feedback from you, they need to really listen and specifically ask how they can improve the coaching for you.
So it's a two-way street. Both sides can learn and grow. Now, to do all this, a coach needs a lot of knowledge. What does the standard say about that?
Oh, they need to know a lot. They got to understand why setting goals is important, the different stages a session goes through, how to create that full presence we talked about, and how to ask good questions. They also need to be able to read your body language, understand different coaching interventions and when to use them, know what makes a good action plan, spot those limiting beliefs that hold you back, set up ways to track your progress, be totally on board with ethical principles, and of course, understand confidentiality.
Wow, that's a lot to keep in mind. And sometimes unexpected things come up. How does the standard deal with that?
There are two main situations the standard talks about. First, what happens if a crisis comes up during a session, like something urgent that needs to be dealt with right then? In that case, the coach should address it directly, and if they can't help, they should refer you to someone who can. The second situation is if the coach thinks you might have a personality disorder. They should recommend you see a qualified mental health professional.
It's important for them to know their limits. And just like with preparation, there are certain attitudes a coach should have, right?
Absolutely. The standard mentions tolerance being understanding of your situation and your learning style, kindness, treating you with respect and genuine care, being organized, making sure the session flows well, being responsible with their interventions, making sure they're ethical and have your consent, and then perseverance, sticking with you and supporting you even when things get tough.
So it's a mix of like skills and personality. Now we're at the last stage.
Yeah.
Evaluating the session. This is where you wrap things up and reflect on what happened.
Right. Yep. The standard talks about how the coach guides you towards a good ending. They should ask you what you learned, recap what you agreed to, make sure you're committed to the tasks you set for yourself, and figure out what you want to focus on next time. It's a cycle, always moving forward.
And just like with prep, there's documentation for evaluation too. The Batakara or coaching session log, what goes in there?
Everything important. Your key learnings from the session, your reflections on the tasks you did, any feedback you have for the coach. The coach also writes down their own thoughts on how the session went and how they did. Then there's evaluating how well you're sticking to the action plan, noting any topics you need to revisit, and tracking your progress overall.
It's like a progress report for both of you. And what kind of knowledge does a coach need to do this well?
They need to understand different levels of change and learning, know how to define the specific behaviors you're working on, know how important those tasks are for measuring progress, and understand what factors both of you should be evaluating.
So you're both working together to assess how things went. And what about the coach's attitude during this stage?
Responsibility, making sure you end on time and respect your time. Perseverance, really encouraging you to commit to your tasks, share your insights, and give honest feedback. And of course, organization, making sure the session log is clear and easy to understand.
So even when wrapping things up, they're still focused on being professional and setting you up for success.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. It's amazing to see all the detail that goes into what might seem like a simple conversation.
Right, it's not just chatting. We've really gone through those three pillars: the prep work, the actual coaching, and the evaluation.
And for you listening, we hope this has given you a better understanding of what real professional coaching looks like. The standard is so detailed and thorough. So thinking about all this, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about coaching? Or how can knowing this stuff help you, whether you're a coach, working with one, or just want to better support people in your life? Lots to think about. Definitely. And if you're intrigued, we encourage you to learn more about coaching. It's all about growth and supporting each other.